Welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a nice break. We're moving on to the first of today's panel discussions now, and this is titled, Will Government Policy Damage the Private Rented Sector? Obviously, the Renters' Rights Bill is wending its way through Parliament right now, and obviously it's going to dramatically alter the way that lettings agents and landlords manage properties, tenancies and tenants, and there are a lot of controversial aspects to it, as you will doubtless be aware. So we're going to pick through this subject with four experts who are alongside me now. On my far left is Angharad Trueman. She's president of the Estate Agency Trade Association Propertymark ARLA, and also a senior lettings figure at Andrews Property Group. Next to her is Heidi Shackall. She's chief executive of the industry tech firm The Lettings Hub, used by 1,200 estate agencies to manage tenancies. To my immediate right, we have Ben Beadle, Chief Executive of the National Residential Landlords Association, representing some 100,000 private landlords in the UK. And sitting alongside him is David Smith. He's a property lawyer at J&W, recognised as one of the industry's leading experts on PRS law, including evictions, planning, and the Renters' Rights Bill. That's your panel. There will be an opportunity for you to put questions to our distinguished panellists if you so wish. But I'm going to kick things off, really. And I think the first question I have is this Renters' Rights Bill going to be as damaging as everyone seems to think it will be? It's obviously going a lot further. I mean, David, maybe you could kick us off with that one.
Disaster, Armageddon, the words that are so often used. No, I don't think it will, actually. Will it change the sector? Yeah, for sure. Will it damage some people's businesses? Yes, for sure. Will it help other people's businesses? Yeah, probably. So the issue here is how you feel about change. And I usually try and see change as an opportunity. So I think there are bags of great opportunities in the Renters' Rights Bill for agents who are interested in that. And configure their businesses promptly in the right way.
Okay, Ben, what do you reckon?
Well, I would agree. I don't buy into the argument, I guess, that everything is going to fall apart. As David says, we can expect change. We can't stop that change. And landlords and agents have got a couple of options. They can either embrace it, look forward, and change, or they can get off the bus at the next stop. Nobody's forcing landlords to stay in the sector. The tricky thing is, we need them, as do our renters. So I do worry about the impact that some of these changes are going to have on renters, because at the end of the day, landlords and agents can change the way they do things, but if you've got 20-odd people searching for a property, that's probably not going to bring rents down anytime soon, and I think that's what people will be mostly concerned about.
Angharad.
Yeah, I think from an agent perspective, I think our members across Propertymark, one of the things that we're most concerned about with renters' rights is the change to fixed-term tenancies. And I think that the majority of the bill is palatable for agents and for landlords, but I think it's the fixed terms that are really going to damage the sector, because fundamentally tenants want fixed terms, landlords want fixed terms. And I think the message that the bill sends to landlords about how vital they are in the industry could potentially have a knock-on impact to stock levels and then rent levels for tenants.
Heidi, any strong thoughts on this?
No, just to support, really. I think, as a private renters sector, we always take a very pragmatic and balanced approach and accept legislation when it comes in. But on this occasion, we need to make sure landlords are maintained in the industry.
I mean, David, as I mentioned, this is wending its weary way through Parliament right now. Can you see the bill as it stands now being amended significantly? What sort of changes potentially might come to the bill before it actually reaches the statute book?
I'd say it was wending its very brisk way through Parliament right now. I mean, I thought the committee stage told you everything you need to know. It was programmed to finish this just last week, or the week that's just ending, and it didn't. It finished at the beginning of the month. And that wasn't because there was a lack of amendments, it was because every time an amendment was started, Matthew Pennycook jumped in and said, that's very interesting, but no, thanks. And they killed all debate stone dead, and that's the power of a government with a significant majority. So the bill, as it's written now, and it's published with committee stage amendments, probably is the bill, frankly.
And do you worry about that, the fact that it has appeared to have relatively little sort of discussion time?
Well, the reason the government's taken the view it has is that it's had quite a lot of discussion time because it's actually largely a carbon copy of the previous reform bill. So there are chunks of it that are the same. I mean, if you want to keep talking about fixed-term tenancies, you know, we've had this discussion now for quite some time, and okay, the government's taken a view on it, which I completely agree that it's problematic, and I'm sure a lot of people aren't happy about it, and it's going to create possibly as many problems as it solves, but that debate's done from the government's perspective. The one area where I think it will be amended, and I think the government has been very clear they're going to amend it, is rent in advance. And the problem that we have at the moment is the bill as drafted may or may not ban rent in advance. The government started out by saying absolutely it didn't. I noticed that Matthew Pennycook's changed that to it might, but we're not sure, which is a bit disturbing given it's his bill. And he's also said that they are minded to ban what they call excessive rent in advance. Now, the problem with that statement is I don't know what large excessive rent in advance payments are. There are amendments from the Liberal Democrats which cap it to a month, which the government's already rejected, so I think they're going for a larger number. But whether it's the 6 months that is in the industry common figure is another matter, and I suspect they'll probably end up plumping somewhere around 3 months.
I'd be interested to hear whether any of you have strong views on this. I mean, do you think that the government has listened sufficiently to industry participants and stakeholders? I mean, clearly, obviously, lobby groups acting on behalf of the renters have clearly made their presence felt. Has the government done enough listening?
No. I don't think they're listening. I think they're very kind of set on what they're going to do when they're going to bring it in and the rules that they have. Just going back to the rent in advance point, that is obviously one thing that concerns the industry. And out of all of the tenancies that we deal with, 7% at the moment have rent in advance. And at the higher end, so rents over £5,000, it's 15% of all tenancies currently go through with it. So it is a challenge, because some of the unintended consequences are going to be that some of the tenants that are currently getting into property are not going to.
So what are you seeing in terms of landlord behaviour right now, Angharad? I mean, are people leaving the market? I mean, obviously, we've just had this increase in stamp duty announced as well, which potentially is another sort of kicker to that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting for me when I hear the terms mass exodus of landlords. I think the stats that we saw earlier from Zoopla was that 12% of their stock is ex-rental properties, and 10% of their stock is investment buyers, people buying. So I think we're not seeing a mass exodus. We're not seeing landlords across the UK decide to kick out perfectly good tenants, serve them Section 21s and exit the market. But I think what we are starting to see is landlords are saying to themselves, right, when my next tenant moves out, I'm going to have a look at how much it's worth then. So they are making that conscious decision to wait for voids and then try and sell it. However, what we're then seeing is these properties are going onto the sales market, and we know that a lot of landlord-owned stock appeals to first-time buyers because of the value and the condition, and we're not seeing the levels of first-time buyers coming forward. So Zoopla, interestingly, earlier said that they are seeing some good levels, but I saw some stats recently from HSBC that said that they've had 300,000 less first-time buyers this year than last year. So that stock is sticking on the market, it's not selling, and occasionally we can get it back to let, but we are seeing landlords start to change their behaviour and look for opportunities to sell perhaps some of the more low-performing rental properties that they have.
Are you hearing that as well?
Yeah, so I don't think there's going to be a mass exodus. And the minister accused us a couple of weeks ago, didn't he, of being alarmist. And we had to get very grumpy.
That's why I'm being good today and not using words like Armageddon.
Well, indeed. But I do think that the sector is about to undergo a huge change. And the minister is in denial about landlords exiting the sector. They bloody well are. Leaving the sector. Perhaps they're not exiting in droves. Perhaps some people are modifying their portfolios and thinking very strategically about the properties that they keep or that they dispose of. But there's certainly a lot of churn taking place at the moment. And that's because we've been talking about some of this nonsense for the last 5 or 6 years. And we're also hearing about energy efficiency that think is far more problematic than renters' rights, to be honest with you. I think that's the next train crash coming down the track. So I don't want to be alarmist in any way, shape or form, but I want to be a realist around what's going on in our sector. And the more you tinker, the more you involve yourself in the sector as a government, the more problems you inadvertently create.
I'm asking you to generalise hugely here, so feel free to tell me to get knotted. But I mean, is there such a thing as a sort of typical landlord who is exiting the sector just now?
We are seeing more what you would call hobby landlords who perhaps aren't looking at it as a business. They are the landlords that we see are exiting more than the portfolio, the landlords that are set up as a business. For them, they look at this investment as a long-term thing. They're not worried about these recent changes. It's the landlords that got in perhaps when when house prices were a bit lower. They saw it as a bit of an extra add-on to what they're doing. It's those type of landlords that are starting to reevaluate whether this investment is really working for them and whether the levels of legislation that they are now held to is worth having to deal with anymore.
But also, people are getting older. So people are naturally either exiting the sector or exiting life generally, and it's that time of life to pass on your properties. So I don't think we can pinpoint one particular thing when it comes to landlords leaving the sector, but average age is early 60s. You probably were going to sell a property around this age and go off on a yacht or a golf course or somewhere fabulous, I don't know, but the other thing is what we're seeing is a younger investor coming into the market. So although around a third of our members are looking at disposing of an asset in some way, shape or form, around 10% are looking to capitalise. And so that shift in dynamic, people are seeing what's going on. They're not worried about Section 21. They're well up to speed with what they need to do on energy, and they're getting on with it, and they're finding opportunities. And that's where we've got to look. We've got to find the opportunities.
Okay, so in terms of the implications for the agents, I mean, this is obviously, this has implications for compliance, for full-service clients. I mean, is this an opportunity for landlords, Heidi?
Yeah, absolutely. Great agents will see an opportunity to get involved. Helping landlords manage their compliance and taking pain points away from them is, what they're there to do. And I think it is a big opportunity to get some landlords off self-managed and into, a tiered system. Whether the tiered system stays as the traditional 3-tiered system that we've seen over many years, I think the industry's got to kind of question whether that's what landlords really want and whether there needs to be a bit of a shake-up to that. But, after the bill's enacted, a landlord's going to have to do things quite differently, and if they don't do so, there's going to be fines, and that's an implication for them. There's about 20 amendments, really, that a landlord has to comply with, after the bill comes in, and therefore there's a lot to kind of manoeuvre. And I think, taking the deposit scheme's recent survey that they did on the Voice of the Landlord, I think 15% of landlords hadn't even heard of the bill, and a further 38% were very much, they'd heard of it, but didn't know what was involved. So there is a fantastic opportunity for agents to get involved, supported by suppliers and partners across the whole industry.
That's amazing. 15% don't even know that this is happening. I mean, that sounds like a real communications job for agents.
Yeah, I think, if you look at the amount of legislation that the average landlord has to abide by, already, 170, 180 different pieces of legislation. If you are a landlord and you are an accountant or a builder or a doctor, you can't physically understand all of that legislation and manage it yourself. So all the agents in the room, we know, and I'm sorry, Ben, but we know that a landlord is safest when they're with us because that is our job, that is what we do all day. So I think this is going to be a real opportunity to appeal to those landlords that think they can self-manage and actually convert them onto a managed basis. Anecdotally, we saw some of my colleagues from ARLA in Wales, when they had their recent change to legislation, they came forward and they said, actually, we had so many landlords coming to us and ringing us and saying, I can't do this anymore, this is too much for me. And I hope that we can use the same opportunity in England to convert them and see the same levels. And actually, as agents, what we should be doing is going out there now, demonstrating our knowledge, demonstrating our expertise, so that we are best placed when those landlords do come forward to take them into our management.
Ben, looking at it from the landlord's perspective, I mean, what sort of things do they want to hear from agents? What do agents need to be saying to them to get them onto a full service arrangement?
Well, they'll have to convince me, because there's a self-managing landlord that holds down a full-time job and looks after his 8 properties himself, and he's very mean at paying an agent. A lot of my members will do likewise. And what I say is, Harry's absolutely right, that you're either in this as a professional landlord or you give it to an agent. And I don't mind which, but you can be a really effective landlord and keep up to speed with things. However, I do know, and we've seen this play out in the past, that regulation is great for business. And it will be great. It was great in Wales for us in terms of membership, and it will be the same for you this time around. The more complexity that we bring to the market, the more people are so fearful of getting it wrong. And I'm afraid, well, for landlords, there will be an additional cost there. And I do think there's an opportunity about how you can help, how you can keep people the right side of the law, because with significant fines for not registering on the database and things like that, that could well turn out to be an annual rent, and you really don't want to get it wrong.
Yeah, I mean, Heidi touched on the fines as well earlier on, David. I mean, who's going to pay these fines? Will agents have to do it if there are mistakes made with managing a landlord's affairs?
Most of the prosecutions and civil penalties attached to landlords, but not all of them. So, for example, if you market a property inside the restriction period because it was previously for sale and it's now jumped back into the letting sector, that is an offence that is not just committed by the person putting it up for marketing, it is an offence committed by the marketing agent as well. So there are aspects in which agents can be directly liable for penalties, but then obviously if you've made mistakes, then you are potentially negligent, and so you may find yourself paying penalties levied on landlords as well. And the issue of penalisation will become much more important. One of the government's core objectives with the PRS database is that all landlords' civil penalties and prosecutions will be on the database and available for tenants to see. So they're trying to create a trust pilot for landlords, I guess. Other services are available, as I say immediately. So the consequences of penalties are starting to really stretch beyond the straight financial number associated with a penalty of £4,000 or £5,000 into a reputational problem.
Out of interest, those of you in the room, did you know that you might end up paying fines? Show of hands? Anyone? So.
See, you're okay with it.
Yeah.
That's good. But I mean, is it too early to talk about from the Welsh experience? Have you seen examples of agents copping fines already from?
I mean, look, I think where a landlord is fined, if they have an agent, they will always look to see if they can pass some of that back to the agent if the agent is at fault. So I don't think we are seeing huge numbers of agents being fined at the moment, but I think where landlords are going wrong or they are losing out at court, they are definitely passing that liability back to the agents that look after them, because that's what we're there to do. We are there to know what we should be doing, what we do, and we're there to know the legislation.
Now, obviously, one of the key aspects of the bill is the abolition of Section 21 evictions. Is that going to affect the ability of agents to remove troublesome tenants? Heidi, I know you've got some strong views on this.
Yeah, I think it's going to become more difficult. With Section 21 going, that's obviously used as a safety net at times, and the implication of a bad tenant is going to be far more significant. I mean, I'll talk about referencing first. The need for, really strong pre-vetting and making sure the right tenant is in the property in the first place is going to be absolutely key. And I think landlords are going to, they all turn into detectives if something goes wrong, and that's going to kind of be even more so. But there is going to be a big change because, advanced rent is possibly not going to be allowed because we're not referencing to a fixed-term tenancy, as, Harry said at the very beginning. People in part-time, temporary work, contract work, how long are they going to stay for? There's some really key things that we've got to have a think about. And guarantors are going to be needed far more often. So professional guarantors kind of emerging in advanced rent solutions. There's going to be a lot of kind of industry change, I think. but it's going to take longer to get a tenant out, and the legal preparation and evidence needed for any agent or any landlord is seriously significant, and I don't think that should be underestimated.
I mean, this is potentially really, really hard for self-managed landlords.
Yeah, it will be. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I think when you look at the replacement grounds for Section 21 broadly, they cover all of the things that a landlord might need to get possession. The issue is one of confidence. Section 21 was brought in to encourage landlords to come to the market, and if you got a bad tenant, you could quickly deal with it. Now, 75% of our members said to us that they were okay with Section 21 going, providing they can still deal with these issues. And I think that, as Heidi says, I do think it's going to be a massive challenge. We were very successful previously at getting Gove to kind of stagger the implementation with regards to the Renters Reform Bill. But of course, what we have now is going to be a big bang date with a very, very short lead-in period, and that is not going to give confidence. And I do worry that it might have unintended consequences in as much as landlords might use it before they lose it. And I really don't want to see that. I think that's, it would be very, very difficult. I understand why, but I wouldn't be advocating for landlords just to use Section 21 before it goes. It is why the court system needs to be improved. It's why the bailiff system needs to be improved. And it's also why we're pushing for an amendment on rent arrears. I don't think we're going to get it, by the way, but the notice period is doubled for rent arrears from 2 to 4 weeks, and the threshold is increased by a third by an extra month. So you can't take any action until you're 4 months down. Well, that's not a robust alternative. That's just a license to give rent dodgers free rein. It's totally unacceptable.
David, were you keen to jump in on this one?
I just see this as a massive opportunity for agents. I mean, obviously it's a massive opportunity for lawyers too, so I'm not exactly crying about it, but from an agent's perspective, this is just a huge opportunity. Landlords tend to use Section 21 for reasons, but they use it because it's easy. And they can avoid a lawyer because they can use the accelerated possession structure, and you can buy kits online to do it. That goes away, so you have to have a reason. So what do agents offer here? Early detection of rent arrears, early opportunity to engage with tenants and filter out problems that are fixable from situations that are unfixable and from dodgers.
I'm not a dodger.
Not your comment of rent dodgers.
Jammy dodger.
I don't know about Ben's rent dodging elsewhere. Skills in actually understanding which grounds apply. It's actually an offence to serve a notice with the wrong grounds on it. So there's a real opportunity to say, if you get this notice wrong, you can be prosecuted. We can sort it out for you. You can either do it in-house or you can send it on a white label basis to somebody else. So there's an opportunity to make sure the notice is coming through you. You have to have reasons, which means you need evidence, which means you need a good quality agent who's doing things by email, has got stuff in writing, has got notes of events. So there's a witness statement that needs to be done. Agents usually do that for free. Why? I don't do them for free. Why would you? There's attendance at court, which agents usually charge for, but really not enough. And every single eviction is going to require an attendance at court because you can't use accelerated possession proceedings. So there's a whole suite of opportunities here in terms of much stronger, much more efficient property management, which also is the holy grail for agents, because what you are aiming to do is convert people from rent-only deals to management deals. That is your best way of making a long-term income. Everything the government is doing is giving you that one way or another. And the right thing for agents to do now is accept this is happening, get over the fact that it's happening pretty quickly, and other people are having trouble with that, so I suggest you move on quickly. And start running through the bill in some detail and look at where every opportunity is. And there are loads. It's a business.
Okay. A great opportunity, David says.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. On some level, I think that there is going to be an opportunity when it comes to things like serving Section 8 notices, the landlord portal, putting landlords on there, charging them to keep them compliant on the portal. I think one of the things I'd caution against is leading up to tenant fee ban, for instance. I was still talking to agents months before who were still in denial. They hadn't reviewed their business contracts, they hadn't reviewed where they were going to make that lost income back. So I think the time is now to start reviewing your terms of business, reviewing these opportunities, as David mentioned, and look at how you can make back those lost renewal fees that you will have, and see some of this as an opportunity for change, because there is going to be more liability on us for serving Section 8 notices. We are going to have to really work to understand the legislation and keep our landlords safe. So I think, yeah, it's really an important time to look at that and start preparing now.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that fixed-term tenancy is obviously coming to an end. I mean, that does hit revenues that one gets from renewals.
Yes, definitely. Renewals will not exist anymore. So we will need to understand what renewal fees we have every month and then work to replace that lost income.
Right. What about, I mean, the government is trying to address certain issues by abolishing the fixed-term tenancies. Is that going to work?
No, it's good. Well, it will work to a degree. The average tenancy length is 4.5 years, so we're not talking about really, really short tenancies here. I think the area that is going to have the most significant impact is the student sector, and I'm really worried about that. We managed to get a moratorium previously that at least gave us a 6-month security, which didn't quite work for the student sector, but it was better than a poke in the eye with a sharp stick. And what we've got now is that I worry about the impact that it's going to have on renters actually being able to select their properties in the way that they have been used to. And I'm hearing more and more rumours around prohibiting early advertisement of student properties as well to try and mitigate against some of this stuff. And I think that at a time when we've got people travelling from from one town to another because of a shortage of student housing, I suspect that a lot of landlords may well shift if their business models can't stack up and do something different. And we have a huge shortage of housing generally, but it's particularly acute in the student sector. And I do think that's going to be a big consequence of the bill. Entirely predictable, by the way.
Okay. David, did you want to come in?
Yeah, specialist sectors are really going to suffer from this, and the student sector is an obvious example of that. What I think is potentially quite interesting about this is what the government, I think, is going to do by mistake is really drive a model diversity. So an awful lot of student landlords are already looking to dump ASTs and the Housing Act 88 altogether and move into a totally different renting model using a different type of legal relationship and probably license agreements or something like that. And the government is probably unintentionally going to start creating a model where different sectors are actually taking rental models and they become quite pervasive. And they step outside the Housing Act 88 model, which I don't think was the government's plan, but I don't necessarily see it as a bad thing. I'm not sure that that's a problem, because one of the problems with all of this stuff is that government keeps treating the PRS like it's one thing, and like all you're selling are apples, and I can just pick up any apple I fancy, and it just really don't work that way. And so in fact, creating a diversity of models is not necessarily a bad thing, because it might drive home the message.
But the irony in that, if I may jump in, is that the minister has very clearly said that he doesn't want to ring-fence any particular part of the sector. And he told me we're lucky to have the ground, and he doesn't really like the ground, even though the ground will be largely pointless, I think, in the absence of a fixed term. But it is interesting, I think, that, as David says, you can't have this one-size-fits-all approach. The PRS is so incredibly unique in terms of the component parts, and you've really got to understand your customer, your audience. And so students, for me, is probably the single biggest change that I think we're going to have to contend with.
Okay. Are you worried for student landlords in that respect?
Yeah, I think the student ground, the new student ground under Section 8 is not fit for purpose in terms of that it only applies to students and a HMO. So it's quite restrictive, and I think the student market is somewhere that we're already seeing is, as Ben has mentioned, there's a shortage. I operate in Bristol. We see students shipped in from Chepstow and from Newport, and I think that this is really where it's going to hit us. But I think I heard an interesting point of view recently about there's going to be a change in tenant behaviour in terms of, at the moment, the big currency for tenants is money, is how much rent they will pay. Okay, that's how they're selected often, and I know there is some question around bidding wars. I think what we're going to move to is, instead of money, I think we're going to look at time. So I think tenants are going to be selected based on how long they wish to occupy that property. So if they've got a 24-month contract, or if they've said, I've moved my kids to the local school, I work around the corner, they're going to look much more attractive to a landlord than a tenant who's going to be coming in and staying for a short period of time. So we're going to see a change in how landlords select their tenants, which I think is going to be quite interesting to watch.
Okay, Heidi?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think, pre-vetting and pre-qualifying tenants before you spend loads of time doing viewings with them is going to be really essential, and asking them the really clear questions that you want to know, and obviously asking them the clear questions to then obviously help you with your hold and deposit management as well becomes fairly critical. But then the tenant that you do select, spending enough time and the right amount of time, really making sure that they are the right tenant. But I think although discrimination laws are going to come into effect, a landlord still is going to be faced with a huge, many options of people that want their property, and they're going to use some criteria like how long they want to be there, how many people they want in the property, etc., to determine who they choose.
Okay, we've a few minutes left. We've some roving microphones on the floor. Does anyone have a question that they're burning to ask our panellists? Straight hand up. Thank you. I'm not going to take you on in an
ever I
auction.
saw one.
Yeah.
Practically on fire.
Here we go. And please introduce yourself as well, if you'd be so kind.
Hi, I'm Megan. It's not working. Hello. Ooh. Hi, I'm Megan. This is a question for Ben. You mentioned earlier about you're seeing landlords coming in earlier and earlier, younger and younger. What age are you now starting to, where does that sit? Are we talking like a whole other generation? Are we talking now the millennials? Are we talking even younger? How do we attract them is basically where I'm kind of getting to.
Well, as a geriatric millennial, probably about 10 years younger. So our members that are joining up at the moment are probably sort of mid to late 30s, that sort of thing. Whereas what we have been used to is, late 50s, 60s kind of on average. And it's so interesting. You have to speak to people in much more different ways in terms of how you attract them in and with your marketing and your offer and your proposition. I often think these guys and girls got balls of steel because they're coming into a market that is appears to be so incredibly hostile towards investors, and you've only got to look at the stamp duty change of recent weeks to see what government thinks about that sort of investment, but it doesn't seem to put them off. It's incredible.
It is amazing. I mean, particularly when you think of where gilt yields are now. You can get a very nice risk-free return just by sticking your money there for the time being. Any more questions from the floor, please? There's one right at the back there. Thank you.
Valerie.
Working. It's a question, please, for David. This is about serving a Section 21 as we lead up to Big Bang go live. What would you say is a reasonable time frame where there's going to be a cut-off, really, that it's not worth still using a Section 21 next year? Thank you.
Well, the cut-off will be when you can no longer serve them, because there is a transitional provision already in the bill that allows Section 21 served before the bill commences to carry over, provided you start proceedings quickly and you're not getting your full 6 months. I think it's 4 months actually. So if you get on with it and issue the proceedings promptly, you can serve a Section 21 right up until D-Day. I think this is actually quite an interesting point about landlords selling, because most landlords don't know anything about the bill. I don't think that TDS figures are actually right, because they're still approaching landlords who know something.
Yes, that's right.
I still get landlords who phone me today who don't know about tenancy deposit protection. So the blissfully ignorant, as I like to think of them out there, will know about this when it happens. And what the government's failed to appreciate is that the 12-month block on sale doesn't apply if your tenancy started more than 12 months before and it transitioned across. And I suspect that actually landlord selling hasn't actually happened yet and will actually happen next year.
Right, we're just about out of time now. Thank you for that answer, David. We have another panel right up next, so please don't go anywhere. But in the meantime, please show your appreciation for David, Ben, Heidi and Angharad.